Welcome to Cornellians in Our Community, CSV's virtual event on health and wellness. I'm Nancy Dreyer, the director of Cornell Silicon Valley, and along with my colleague Kate Van Delsum and the whole West Coast team, we are delighted to have you here today. First, a few housekeeping tips. Please be sure that your microphone is on mute and your video camera is turned off during the presentation and Q&A segments. We'll ask you to turn them on when you enter the breakout rooms later in the program. The format of the program will include short presentations by each of our 4 panelists, followed by a moderated question and answer session. You will then be randomly assigned to a breakout room for a conversation facilitated by one of our speakers. Shortly before 1 p.m., we'll come back together for brief closing remarks. If you'd like to ask a question of our panel, please type it in the chat window. You will receive a post-event survey, and I hope you'll take a few moments to share your input with my team. I expect this will be the first of many virtual events, and I'm seeking your opinion on today's program, topics you'd like to hear about, and speakers you'd like to hear from, including yourselves. Don't be shy, please share your thoughts. And finally, this presentation is being recorded and may be distributed via university channels at the conclusion of the event. So let's get to our program. I'm delighted to introduce 4 Cornellians who live in the Bay Area and work in various fields of health and wellness. Today, they will share some observations and tips with you and answer your questions, many that were submitted in advance. While we aren't on campus today, that doesn't stop us from recalling some of our favorite places. Ian Shea, class of '96, recalls riding through the plantations on his bike and swimming in the gorge. Wendy Sterling, class of '99, couldn't decide if she'd prefer to be looking at the clock tower, walking across the suspension bridge, or standing at the top of Live Slope looking down on West Campus. Christian Thompson, class of '93, is thinking of the view from the roof of the 11-story Bradfield Hall, where he studied meteorology. And Christina Kahn, class of 2000, is envisioning the gorge next to the Schwartz Center for the Performing Arts. Without further ado, Ian, you're up.
Thank you, Nancy, very much for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. It's nice to reconnect with the Cornell community. I wanted to be giving this talk from my home in San Francisco, but that's not the case. I'm currently talking to you from room 1905 in the Hotel Sheraton Tribeca. I got to New York around March 10th for a work trip. I was going to be here for about a week, and then I wound up contracting the coronavirus. I've been self-quarantining in this room ever since, and I'm happy to report that I'm doing much better physically. I'm on the mend, and I hope to be at 100% in the next week or so. And while the physical challenges were difficult and they were real, today what I'd like to talk to you about is some of the mental and emotional challenges that I had to work through, because in many respects, they were more difficult than my physical ones. Each night as I would go to bed in this hotel, I found myself craving some answers, craving some comfort, craving some certainty. And the way I would go about doing that is I would pick up my phone and check it. And what I found normally in the past when I would do that is I could check out a score of a favorite sports team. I could read a text from a dear friend who would make me laugh or feel more connected to them. But as I was doing it during this period, I was getting nothing but negativity. And what that meant for me is as I was going to bed each night, I'd be going to bed with a little bit of unease, a little bit of anxiety, and a little bit of fear. When I woke up the next morning, I would do the exact same thing. So before I sat up and put my feet on the ground, I was already starting my days in this negative downward spiral. When I got out of my bed and started my day, the first thing I would do is turn on the news. And why I turned on the news is because I was craving that same level of certainty, maybe some comfort and answers that I was the night before. But I wasn't getting any of that from the news. All I was doing was increasing the negative inputs that I was absorbing in my system. And this is before I even started my day. And what that translated into on a mental and emotional level for me and where I struggled was in the following areas. I found myself getting irritated. I found myself being angry. I found myself being enraged. An example of that is when a dear friend called just to check up on me and see how I was doing. And when I got that call, I interpreted it as an attack. It was almost as if I was feeling, how dare he call me, or how dare he check in on me? And in hindsight, all he was trying to do was reach out and say he cared and he loved me. I found myself struggling with my own self-worth, my own value. I'm doing something that I love. I've been doing this for years. I'm good at it. And all of a sudden, I'm questioning whether or not I have any value. I found myself dealing with a lot of fear and anxiety. And I think as I looked at that, what was underlying that was control. I had all sorts of questions surfacing on a daily basis that were unanswerable. Questions such as, when was I going to leave? Were they going to close this hotel down? How was I going to get better? And the stream just kept going on and on and on. And what that translated into was a constant murmur of worry and fear, which was exhausting. And what I noticed during this experience was this was the perfect playground for some of my deepest insecurities and fears to surface and get legs. And where I would normally go to pacify those, or for my own self-care, things like going for a yoga, going for a run, maybe grabbing a bite with a dear friend, those were all gone. I just had to sit with them. And this is my work. I teach life moments for a living, and I'm in the midst of my own life moment, and I needed help. I still need help. What I noticed as time went on is that an opportunity started to emerge. Because I couldn't escape these emotions, because I had to stay with them, that allowed me time to understand them a little better and name them. And what I noticed was in the naming, that started the process of unlocking them. And if you think of the movie Inside Out, where they went to the trouble of naming emotions, as I was naming my own emotions, I noticed they had a lot less power on me. So what I would like us to do is just take a moment and think about what it has meant to be human for you during this pandemic. What emotions might have surfaced for you? Specifically, what challenges have been real for you? I'd also like us to take a moment just to think about what opportunities might have surfaced, or where have there been some silver linings? We're going to talk more about that in the breakout session, but that's how I wanted to end. And thank you so much for your time. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Wendy.
Thank you, Ian. I never thought that I would be giving a lecture about nourishing nutritional habits during a pandemic. Many people are reporting nutritional challenges during this time. And what I'm hearing are a lot of discussion about missed meals, late night eating, grazing all day in response to stockpiles of food that have been around, eating out of boredom, and increased consumption of alcohol. There are unquestionably changes in physical activity as well. Team sports are canceled, swimmers and water polo players are not in the water, tennis players are not on the court, and traditional fitness classes are also not happening. But it's not all doom and gloom with respect to activity. I do think many people are getting out more than they were before. Some of my athletes are actually doing more activity than they were before. A basketball player that I saw yesterday traditionally was training about 5 days a week, but now switched to training 7 days a week and was doing multiple training sessions a day. I actually had to tell her to train less. Some exercise is immune boosting, but to note, post-exercise, there is a post-exercise immune function dip that can occur when exercise is prolonged over an hour and a half and when intensity is moderate to high. So now is not the time for marathon training. Despite a global pandemic going on in the background, there are many people who are concerned about the impact of their eating habits and its effect on their weight. A study conducted by the University of Missouri School of Social Work found that among a sample of almost 900 young adults, over 40% agreed that it would be worse to gain 25 pounds during social distancing than be infected with COVID. Our society is riddled with fat phobia, despite an evidence that people can be healthy in larger bodies. Kids get the message that thin is good and fat is bad. Kids are obsessed with chiseled biceps and six-pack abs and this concept of a thigh gap. An 8-year study published in 2019 by Stice and colleagues found that a primary risk factor for the development of an eating disorder is the perceived pressure to be thin. So this stress is real and can have devastating consequences should an eating disorder develop. The weight loss and dieting industry is $72 billion, yet 95% of diets fail. And the failure of these diets is in part what drives the economics of the industry. People do need to keep coming back to find a different strategy. A study of nearly 17,000 children ages 9 to 14 found that dieting was a significant predictor of weight gain and led to increased risks of binge eating in both girls and boys. So instead of focusing on weight loss or beginning the keto or an intermittent fasting protocol, I ask my clients to develop sustainable nutritional habits from a variety of different domains. This may include working on managing emotions, stress, maintaining good sleep schedules, reducing screen time usage, reducing alcohol consumption for the adults, enjoying and including regular joyful movement, establishing regular and consistent meal patterns that include family meals, and learning to include intuitive eating. Establishing regularity in meal schedule, by the way, is harder than it sounds. And I joke with clients that eating 3 meals and 2 snacks is a good rhythm for almost everyone. Meals to me are usually many different food groups paired together to fill a plate and to make a complete meal that is both enough in volume, complete in nutrition, and also yummy. A girl I saw recently who was terrified that I was going to take away foods that she liked to eat, as so many dietitians had done with her before. I said to her, no, I'm not going to do that. I actually want to add foods. I want you to eat meals, real food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But when you are able to make a meal with many different food groups that are paired together to make a complete meal that is both enough in volume, complete in nutrition, and yummy, people really do end up listening more to their appetite, grazing less, being more in tune with their body, and really binging less. I also teach clients to use what's called a hunger meter, a tool that teaches them to assess hunger and fullness cues. And this scale goes from 1 to 10, where 1 is starving and 10 is stuffed. At a 1, you can't think clearly. You're likely to go on your natural stopping place. A 3 to 4 is a great place to decide when to eat a meal, likely a little bit of a twinge in your stomach. A 6 to 7 is a great place to stop. You're full, but you're not too full. You're comfortable. And a 9 is getting to a place of Thanksgiving Day stuffed. So before panicking and starting on a nutritional path that might be short-term and perhaps a little risky for those living in your house, perhaps young kids, think about what nutritional habits you might be able to tweak that would give you success over the long term. Thank you. And now I will turn it over to Christian.
Thank you very much, Wendy. And thank you for Nancy having this event today. I'm very happy to be here. And it has been an interesting time. The last 2 to 3 months, I've probably learned more as a kinesiologist about my own behaviors and my own patterns of activity than I learned through the last 25 years of studying this area. It's really interesting. I mean, challenges bring opportunities. Challenges bring opportunities for us to evaluate what our own habits are. Challenges bring opportunities to try something new and try something different. And these last 3 months have been certainly a test of that. I'm on faculty at the University of San Francisco over spring break, mid-March. We went virtual. All of my students from around the country, even around the world, ended up going home. And we would communicate via Zoom from that point on to the end of the semester. And it was really inspiring to see these kids who I'd see in the classroom and had to sacrifice getting to San Francisco, renting with some friends in an apartment, and getting to class in the morning. But I kind of learned a greater appreciation for the efforts and time they were taking to log on in the morning. One girl who was in Japan was logging on to lecture in the middle of the night. It was 1:30 a.m. Japan time when she would be logging on and coming to class. And just starting to recognize that they, along with me, had opportunities to kind of change up their daily schedules and get to things maybe during the course of the semester they didn't have time to get to. So when I look at what my own patterns had been, I came into this having been a regular exerciser for probably the last, well, my whole life. And I was a member of a Pilates gym. I'm hooked on Pilates, fantastic. And kind of I got used to or indoctrinated into following a routine that somebody else put together for me. I felt almost like I was responsible to somebody else, but not necessarily responsible to myself. I felt like, I realized my locus of control became very external. I wasn't necessarily working out just for me. I was working out because I was paying a fair amount of money to be a part of this studio. I was working out because I enjoyed the companionship there. I was working out because I found Pilates to be fun. But really, at the core, started to recognize that I was missing out on a lot of different activities that I could be engaging in. And this time, being at home, spending time with my wife, my kids, my dog, provided us the opportunity to get out and do a lot of different things. I'm going to show you a little screenshot of my step count over the last several months. And prior to COVID, I was averaging 10 to 11,000 steps a day. Some days better, some days worse. And now I'm well up over 12,000 steps a day, just because I'm spending more time that I have to spend with my family, with my dog, get out into my neighborhood. I've walked, I think, every single street in my town of Moraga. It's been pretty amazing. So what I'm going to ask all of you in the breakout session is exactly how your workout habits have changed over the last several months. Have they increased? Have they decreased? Have they stayed about the same? And perhaps have they changed in their characteristics? It's been a really interesting time for all of us, and I hope that we're taking advantage of it because, as Ian mentioned, it gives us a chance to look at our emotions and start taking what our emotions are telling us and changing perhaps some of our behavior patterns. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christina. Christina, take it away.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you to Nancy for organizing this. Delighted to be reconnected with the Cornell community. All right. So I'm a pediatric and adult psychiatrist, and I specialize in trauma. I work at Stanford, and I work primarily with two populations. Physicians, many of whom are currently working on the front line, and I also run an LGBTQ clinic called Thrive. Most of the work I do is trauma-informed, and today I want to share with you 4 principles for managing stress and traumatic stress. First, though, let's talk about definitions. What is trauma? Trauma is a broad term, and it encompasses an endless variety of experiences. Some examples include the secondary, now primary trauma experienced by medical professionals in their everyday work. There's more insidious trauma, like microaggressions, discrimination, more overt forms of trauma, like abuse, accidents, natural disasters, death and loss. The list goes on and on. But the key defining feature of any experience that is traumatic is that it disrupts our belief systems about ourselves and the world. And today, all of us, health professionals or not, are experiencing a disruption to the world as we know it. And our other speakers spoke very eloquently about this. We're experiencing a disconnect between our sense of safety, our sense of autonomy, or independence, our sense of control, and what we can actually practice in everyday life. And so it comes as no surprise that many of us are dealing with symptoms of trauma. These are universal in the face of disruptions to our beliefs. And many of us are coping with the effects of traumatic stress during this pandemic. This includes things like what Ian mentioned: anxiety, fear, disruptions to sleep and appetite, problems with attention and concentration, issues of power, control, questions about safety, trust, a diminished ability to envision the future. Under normal circumstances, recovery from traumatic stress can take time, months, even years. The good news is we all have inherent mechanisms for adaptive coping and resilience, even in the face of uncertainty. So I'll share with you 4 principles for coping with traumatic stress and for tapping into your inherent resilience. Principle 1, coping skills, coping skills, coping skills. Strengthening your stress management and coping skills. This is a cornerstone of trauma therapy and encompasses many of the things that were already touched on today by our other speakers. Coping skills are really the best thing we have in life to counter adversity. And we sometimes fail to build on those strengths or even recognize what they are. So I encourage you all to create routines that maintain some sort of semblance to familiarity in your life. Be it the regular eating pattern that Wendy discussed, incorporation of regular physical activity that Christian mentioned, a regular sleep schedule, connection to family and friends, spirituality if that is part of your life. Find your coping mechanisms and hone them. Principle 2, re-engage meaning and hope. Trauma can lead to a feeling of being lost, without purpose. It can feel as if we're going through the motions. Sometimes we lose access to the things that brought meaning in our lives. Sometimes we lose access to our home when we're isolating. Other times they are still accessible to us, but we fail to engage them. And so I encourage each of you to find meaning in each and every day. Find activities that bring meaning for you. This might mean going back to the basics of mindfulness, tapping into the data your 5 senses are bringing in each and every moment. You can do this by being in nature, by stopping to smell the flowers, by playing with a child or a pet, singing at the top of your lungs, dancing as if no one is watching you, engaging in art or a hobby, doing something physical to get out of your head and back into your body. Principle 3, take back control where you can. Many times we give up our own power and control unknowingly. An example is one of my patients who is a physician on the front lines and was struggling with a lack of control in her work and loss of her exercise routine. We decided a good behavioral plan for her would be to go on a walk twice a week. And the first walk was nice. She was able to re-engage in mindfulness and found it rejuvenating. On the second walk, she took her phone with her and she chose to listen to the news and a podcast. And she found herself spinning by the end of the walk, filled with anger and frustration about the misinformation and the controversy she heard. What she learned was that she was relinquishing control of her experience unknowingly, and this was adding to her level of stress. By taking that back, she is regaining a sense of agency and self-efficacy in her everyday. We get to choose where to focus our attention. So choose your exposures rather than getting into an autopilot mode of letting them choose you. And the final principle is to remember the concept of impermanence. The only thing we are guaranteed in life is change. All things will pass. And this too, this pandemic, this shelter in place, this seeming stagnance of our world will pass. I'm going to end with a mindfulness exercise that will help illustrate the principle of impermanence and help with dealing with stress and anxiety if you can find time to practice. So I encourage you to close your eyes if you'd like and start to notice your breathing. Notice the rise and fall of your breath. With each exhalation, each inhalation, notice the thoughts passing through your minds, the emotions and feelings that you can identify. Observe the physical sensations in your body. If there's any pain, any tightness, any tension. These thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations are all transient. They're mental formations, like clouds passing in the sky, like waves of experience in an ocean of awareness. Each wave will pass, and they leave us with what is. A sea of awareness, conscious awareness. And in this sea, in this ocean, you get to choose where to focus your attention. Thank you for your attention today.
Coming back into my being. That was incredible, Christina. Thank you. And I'm going to ask all of our speakers to make sure that they come off of, they turn on their videos now and their sound so that we can ask them some questions to follow up on their incredible presentations. So I see them all in front of me. I hope all of you do as well. Can show them in the speaker view. They'll all be able to be front and center on your screen as they all speak. And in the event that you are seeing others that whose video is off, just right click on any of those black boxes and that will, you'll be able to hide any person who is not one of our participants. So Ian, I'm gonna ask you the first question that came in. I'm wanting to know, what can I as a manager be doing or thinking about with respect to supporting the emotional well-being of my employees?
I think one of the things I try to do with this speech was just to share some of the experiences I've had going through this. And what I find from a manager perspective, the more your team can hear that you're going through things, the more it gives them permission for what they may be going through. So one of the examples was, I spoke to a CEO the other day, and he confided in me, he's very isolated right now, as we all are, and he confided in me that each day was like going through mud for him. And it just so happened that I, in my mind, had the framing sludge. A lot of my days have been like sludge. And so when he said mud and I said sludge, it was as we related to one another, and it validated our experience. So from a manager's perspective, the more you can show just little hints of your own humanness or your own experiences, I think that can go a real long way. At building community and allowing your employees just to feel okay with their experience and validated. And it also starts to shift and expand your culture to take advantage of what this time is affording us, which is to be more emotionally sensitive within organizations.
Great, thank you. Wendy, I have one question with two little parts to it for you. So people are really interested in immunity and what they might be able to do to make themselves more immune to this illness. So I have two separate questions. One is, do you think taking a daily supplement of vitamin D may be helpful to prevent COVID-19? And to tack on to that, do you have any suggestions for nutrients to boost our immunity during this time?
Yeah, great question. You know, there was recently a study that came out with respect to COVID that vitamin D users did better. And I'm not sure where I saw that, but there was I can look and send it to you, Nancy. Maybe you can send it to the group. In fact, it was in some of the articles that I did send you. There was some mention that vitamin D is associated with reduction in general of illness. And so I think the recommendation in those articles was about 2,000 IUs. And so that's one thing. And then other nutrients that are helpful for boosting immunity. We know vitamin C can really reduce risk of severity and duration of upper and lower respiratory infections. Zinc deficiency, which is actually more common than you would think, can be an issue for immunity. So making sure you're not deficient. And then fish oils are associated with reducing inflammation. So those tend to be good ones to keep in mind. And then just I'll add other things to make sure that, you know, you're not missing out on full nutrition, because severe energy deficiency can also reduce immune system. And then, as I mentioned previously, over exercising prolonged duration can also cause immunodeficiency. So, and then also, of course, making sure you're getting enough sleep, all things that can help with immune system.
Well, you're making me feel a little bit better, because I do take a dose of vitamin D 5 days a week. So, you know, a little bit of relief here. Working on the inflammation. We're also a big turmeric family. So we'll see how that goes as well. So thank you for those tips.
Turmeric's very anti-inflammatory as well. So yeah.
Yes. So, Christian, somebody forwarded in a question wanting to know what are the clinical and physical benefits of Tai Chi. Can you share some scoop on that?
Yeah, a great time also to be doing Tai Chi. One of the interesting things that we've discovered are how many really wonderfully developed free video options there are, whether it's on YouTube, Vimeo, other things like that. Tai Chi has been shown in a number of randomized controlled trials. So we're talking like the top state of the science, to improve balance functioning, to improve muscle strength, to improve a person's general overall kind of awareness of the environment that they're in. And all of those serve to reduce fall risk. And the area that I particularly study, both in my research at USF and also with my consulting business, is specifically on fall prevention with older adults. We know that that is an epidemic. You know, we're dealing with a pandemic with COVID-19. The falling epidemic amongst older adults is real. Over a third of people over the age of 65 fall every year. And it leads to hundreds of thousands of fractures and majorly reduced quality of life. So whether it's Tai Chi, doing balance classes, focusing on things like vitamin D, a very potent activator of our fast twitch muscle fibers, which help us recover from stumbles and trips. So nutritional status and exercise are just fundamental to helping a person maintain balance and reduce fall risk, which is super important at this time.
Thank you. Christina, I have a question for you. I don't think you could even answer this in the 1 hour of the entire event, but we'll see if you can at least give us some guidance of where to start. So, a question of how we can manage conflict in our marriages and or with roommates during this time.
That is a good question. Well, I mean, I think if I had a one-word answer to that question, it would be empathy. And there's lots of ways to work on our empathy. I think being able to truly put ourselves in the position of the other person and hear what they're saying is a skill. It's one that we all struggle with at times and can certainly perpetuate conflict when we're failing to be empathic. But it's a really important skill to hone in the face of conflict and when we're all needing additional support. You know, there's lots of mental health resources that are available during this pandemic. Most therapists have gone online at this point, and there are professional resources available. There's lots of self-help resources available as well for dealing with conflict. A lot of books out there, a lot of podcasts. So I encourage folks to be resourceful and look for resources. I'll provide some in my post-event resource list. But if I had one answer to that question, it would be work on your empathy skills.
Thank you. I want to follow up to that because I know from the conversation that you and I had, you're doing a lot of work with other healthcare providers. And so people are definitely interested in the wellness of our healthcare workers. Can you share a little bit about the kinds of initiatives that you've recently been involved with in the healthcare sector?
Absolutely. So what we're finding is similar to the general population is increased anxiety and stress among healthcare workers. There's always burnout in medical work with pandemic or without. And that's related to the trauma that the medical professionals face with constant exposure to illness, critical illness, death, dying. But now there's even more, I guess, primary threat, which is a threat to their own wellness and health as well. And so that raises the bar for stress and anxiety. And we're trying to address that through different wellness groups, through having both individual resources and group resources available to healthcare providers. Through, in my department, we're doing reconnect and recharge groups to allow folks a space to just share what they're experiencing and learn from each other, know that they're not alone, validate the feelings that are coming up. There's a variety of different things that are happening around the country to really try to support healthcare professionals. And I think we're really just learning about what this pandemic response looks like. And as we learn, we can build additional programs to meet the need of what is presenting in our medical community.
Thank you. I have one more question I'm going to put out before we go to our breakout rooms. This is going to be for Wendy. Wendy, other than the hunger meter that you mentioned, what are some other tools that people can use to become more disciplined about their eating habits?
Well, I think, you know, my background is in eating disorders. And so I shy away from the word disciplined. That makes me a little uncomfortable. I do think organization, I think meal prep is a really good idea. I really do like the idea of an organized plate where all food groups are present. I had a parent recently kind of complaining that their child was eating a lot of goldfish. And when I, went through his day, there was a missing breakfast and only half a lunch. And I think people really in general are doing a lot of meal skipping or insufficient meals and then are really hungry later on in the day. And so I think, this COVID pandemic has gotten people back in the kitchen, which has been, I think, Ian's question, a silver lining in this whole thing, getting more in the kitchen, doing a lot more cooking, a lot more full meals so that if there are times in the day when you're finding that you're just eating these large amounts or grazing, look at your habits and take a look and see what's going on for you and begin to put together meals that kind of really fill you up so that you're not grazing or overeating, and see what you can do with respect to that. Do your meals have enough color? I talk a lot about that. A lot of my adolescents, especially, they'll make these brown looking meals or white looking meals. And, where is that vibrant color that adds a lot of anti-inflammation, antioxidants, fiber, things like that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So we're going to move to the next part of our program, and I'm really excited about this. So by the shuffle of our wizards behind Zoom, everybody is going to be automatically directed to a breakout room where you're going to have the opportunity to interact with one of our speakers. We have been able to designate each of them into a different room, and so you'll be able to network with them and with each other. So when you get into the room, make sure you turn on your video and your audio so that you can all interact. And then at about 5 minutes to 1, we're all going to come back together to close out our program. So glad to have everybody back, and I see our speakers up on the screen and everybody else is hiding from view. So we've done a really great job Hope you had a good time interacting with people in your group, our speakers, and maybe seeing a friend or two. I'm going to ask each of our speakers to very briefly, we just have 3 minutes until we hit that 1 o'clock hour, to just share with us maybe the prompt that they spoke on and 1 or 2 highlights. So let's start with Ian, quick.
We spoke about some of the emotional challenges that have surfaced, and the 2 buckets were in and around parenting. How is
Ian, I'm not hearing you.
Can you not hear me?
I can hear him.
I can hear him.
So I will just keep going. I think some people can. So the two emotional challenges that surfaced for us or that were shared were in and around parenting, like how to interact with your parent and or how does a parent interact with their child during these times and the complexities, as well as the jobs, some of the job challenges, specifically around difficult conversations as a manager that had to occur. Having those happen over Zoom is really challenging because you can't really pick up the nuances. And the opportunities that surfaced that were shared were in and around vulnerability. Like this time has created a space for vulnerability for parents to get to know their children as adults and children to get to know their parents as adults, as well as time to get to connect with friends and partners. So those are the 2 things we talked about. And I'll hand it over to Wendy because probably we'll just keep going.
Okay, so we spoke about nutritional challenges during this pandemic, and some of those included access to food, lots of sweets around during the pandemic, trying some new foods that came our way. And then what was interesting was the idea that, kind of came out of it was people were becoming a little bit more flexible. And then this idea of sort of not panicking when you sort of realize, whoa, this is going to happen for a while, and just sort of easing back into your normal rhythm and just getting back to your real life. Oh, and I'll pass it on to Christian.
Thanks, Wendy.
Yeah.
We were basically talking about different changes to a physical activity routine, exercise routine. And many people had a consistent routine going on prior to the pandemic starting, where they'd be going to a gym or going to doing a specific type of exercise at some type of a studio. And obviously that had to be revisited. What's interesting is it seems like most folks are doing a lot more walking than they used to do, and actually enjoying it, getting to experience and learn more about the areas that they're in, walking through neighborhoods perhaps they hadn't walked in before, and that kind of connects you a bit more with your community as well, and gives you a chance to see where you live in a little bit of a different light. And additionally, people are kind of seeking out other movement opportunities as well. One of our folks, they are doing yoga now, what they hadn't done before. Others are considering doing more dance and Tai Chi. So I think people are seeing it as a great opportunity to try out some new things and maybe get a little bit more of a diverse experience for physical activity. So that's an opportunity here. I'll pass that along to Christina now.
Thank you, Christian. So we had 2 prompts. What in your life can you control during this pandemic, and what creates meaning for you? And just in a few words, people are learning to practice radical acceptance and control what they can and accept the change that we're all experiencing. Some people commented on being able to control their attitude, being able to control choices. Some people are struggling with controlling choices, even though they know they have control over those things. In terms of meaning, nature was one of the bigger items. A lot of people are finding meaning in watching spring turn into summer, looking at the bumblebees, the hummingbirds, the grass. Some people find meaning in family, meditation. One person commented on finding meaning in the news and the anger and frustration it brings up that really propels her to want to be an advocate for change. And so I think it's important for everyone to notice the things that bring meaning to each and every day. Oh, we can't hear you, Nancy.
Hear you, Nancy.
Hi, everyone. Amanda jumping in here. Unfortunately, Nancy's having some audio issues, so I would just like to thank all of you for sharing these prompts that you took away and these points that you took away. I thank all of our speakers for sharing their time with us today. This has just been so great. Thank you to all of our attendees for tuning in as well. We hope you enjoyed this. It was recorded, and we'll be sharing the recording. We will also be sharing a survey, so we hope you'll take the time to fill that out and let us know what you think about this program and future programs. And stay healthy and be well, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.